I'm Wendell Jones, and welcome to another edition of our webinar that we have on a regular basis from the Embassy of the Bahamas in Washington, D.C. This is our 13th edition. We've been doing this for 2 years, and we want to connect with Bahamians wherever they are in the United States. Bahamians and their descendants in many states so that they can speak about their work, their achievements, their aspirations, and then they can speak about their views about the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, where we are as a country, and where we are going. We are a beautiful country, and we are a safe country. And we have our challenges, but we are a nation in progress, and we are making tremendous progress where we are in this space. And so today we have some exciting panelists on this webinar who are going to address many of the issues and challenges that we have as a country. Dr. Ruth May-Sayers, who is a professor, secondary education mathematics at the University of South Florida. She is going to tell you more about herself in a short while. Then we have Mr. Vern Paragod, who is a partner in Michigan. John Ray Kemp, a civil litigation attorney in Michigan and Texas. Shanique V. Gray, who is a partner, audit and assurance, Deloitte and Touche, operating in Virginia. Mr. Javon Sands, who has been recently awarded a 2024 Caribbean Commonwealth Rhodes Scholarship. He's going to Oxford very soon. And we are going to also be joined, I believe, by Diamond Pearson, yes, who is a speech and language pathologist in North Carolina. And so, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar, and I believe that we are going to have a very exciting conversation today. So for starters, let us hear some more about yourselves. We're going to begin with Dr. Ruth May-Sayers. Tell us some more about yourself. I mean, as I said to you off air, you have some exciting biographies here, so I'm not going to read them. I just want you to express to our audience what you have been doing and what you have achieved in terms of your education. Dr. Sayers?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruth May-Sayers. I am a faculty at the University of South Florida. I have a joint appointment between the College of Education and the College of Arts and Sciences, but I am a proud child of Bahamian soil, born and bred, and a proud graduate of the then College of the Bahamas, which is now the University of the Bahamas. But I want to go a step further and highlight I was a proud public school graduate of the Great C.R. Walker Secondary School under the leadership of Howard Newbold. Now, why do I always introduce myself as a proud public school graduate? Because I highlight that with good training, good teachers, and an effort to learn, anything is possible. So as persons celebrate the fact that I was a AAAS fellow, the first Black AAAS fellow in the university's history, one of the highest honors in STEM among the many awards, I would always tell them, as we celebrate my success, it must be shared with the team of educators that have supported me and brought me this far. And so as I tell my story, My friends and family from the island of Exuma, my father's homeland, they always say, make sure you also acknowledge that you are a descendant of Forbes still Exuma. So that must also be a part of my story. So to my aunts and uncles and everyone out there watching from Exuma, please know I'm sending my love as well. And
Well,
so that is how I would want to introduce myself. Someone who's committed to mathematics curriculum, mathematics advancement, and the advancement of science, but a proud Bahamian, a
very,
child of Bahamian soil.
very good, very good. We're going to do the ladies first. Shanique Gray, good to have you.
Thank you. It is so good to be here. Good afternoon, everyone, to my fellow panelists, to all our listeners and viewers. What a great day to be a Bahamian. That's what I'd like to say. But in terms of introducing myself, as the ambassador mentioned, my name is Shanique Gray. In terms of work, I'm an audit partner with the great firm of Deloitte and Touche. And I know Vern Perry-God, my classmate, will have something to say about our colleagues in terms of the firms that compete with each other, but we are friendly colleagues. I am a graduate of St. Anne's High School, very proud graduate. Vern and I attended Acadia University in Canada together, and then I went on to do my master's at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom. So much like Dr. Sears just commented, a conglomerate, if you will, of people and teams that really helped to get me where I am. And I am so grateful and so humbled for all of the people that had a hand in getting me to this point. But I especially have to call out my parents and my family, because when I was making partner a few years ago, they asked me to tell a story about, just my values and where I come from and where my drive comes from. And one of the quotes I used was that my parents would always say to me, they are behind me 200%. I'm a CPA, and so we all know from a math perspective, there really is no such thing as 200%. It's really 100%. But it really just demonstrated that they were 100% behind me and so much more. And so really do want to pay homage to them today for all that they've done to get me to this point. In terms of my day-to-day life, I am a CPA practicing in the Washington, D.C. area, but really moving around the country because Deloitte is a national firm, but really a global firm. And so a lot of the work I do actually extends beyond DC and even beyond the borders, if you will, of the United States. I have clients that sit in the UK and throughout Europe. And so really have just been afforded a great opportunity to not just make a mark in the city and the state in which I live, but really being able to affect the global markets across borders. And so again, very grateful to be here today. Thank you, Ambassador, for the invitation, and I look forward to the conversation.
Very good. Diamond Passon.
Good afternoon to my fellow panelists and listeners. My name is Diamond Pearson, and I am a speech language pathologist in Durham, North Carolina. I'm a recent graduate of North Carolina Central University in Durham. I got my master's in communication sciences and disorders. And previous to that, I got my bachelor's in communication sciences and disorders at Shaw University. So I'm proud to say that I went to two HBCUs that have such history in North Carolina. And prior to this, I also went to St. Anne's High School and I graduated salutatorian there, but I am a speech language pathologist now. And I think that this field is very important, especially in the Bahamas, because we don't have a lot of speech language pathologists or audiologists, and a lot of individuals don't even know the services that we provide. I actually had the pleasure of working with Dr. Kim Scriven, one of the few audiologists back in the Bahamas. And it was just such an inspirational experience. And it encouraged me to do my capstone project titled Dialectal Differences and Its Impact on International Students' College Experiences. And that highlighted the vocational, socio-emotional, and educational challenges that international students have in American higher education institutions.
Very good, thank you. Okay, let's hear from the young men on our panel today. Attorney Jean-Ray Kemp.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, panelists, viewers. My name is Attorney John Ray Kemp. Started my education at the St. John's College in Nassau, Bahamas. Moved to Houston, Texas to live with my aunt and uncle, Lyndon Rose and Priscilla Rose. My uncle was a member of the Phi Slamma Jamma basketball. So I came to America to play basketball, but I outgrew that in size and played football. Got a scholarship to the University of Houston, where I played football. After my football career, I went to law school at HBCU, Thurgood Marshall School of Law in Houston, and got an LLM from the University of Florida, finishing the top 10% of my class. Son of Sharon Rose Hutchinson and John Kemp, my mom, attorney, rest in peace. My father, a liquor merchant. So I grew up with a education and an entrepreneurial mindset to make sure that I further not only my education, but further my business aspects as well. I'm married to the lovely Dr. Alicia Kemp. She's an orthopedic oncologist in Detroit. We have two lovely sons, Benjamin and Bentley, and it's a joy to share my culture with her and with everybody that I tend to meet throughout this journey. I look forward to investing and putting a lot of business in the Bahamas, but more importantly, taking stuff back to the family islands and one that's close to my heart, Cat Island, because that is where my mother is from and the prime minister right now. So I have a big love for Cat Island and the Bahamas. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Let's listen now to Mr. Vern Paragod.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists, to you, Mr. Ambassador, and to the viewers and listeners around the world. I like Shanique said, it's a great day to be a Bahamian. I am proud to be on this panel. I am a proud Bahamian. As they say, born, bred, and dead Bahamian. I am a son of a Bahamian businessman, Ken Perigord, and a educator who Dr. Sears may know from her time at C.R. Walker, Cleome Woods, who was a math teacher at C.R. Walker. So I always tell my friends and tell my family that I am a perfect mix of business smarts and book smarts from my mother and father. And I am a proud graduate of Queens College. So apologies to the St. John's and St. Anne's graduates out there. I'm a proud QC Comet, class of 1998. And I am a graduate from College of the Bahamas with an associate's degree in accounting. And like Shanique, I attended Acadia University in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I am a graduate from there with a bachelor's degree in accounting as well. And once I completed my studies in Acadia in Canada, I moved to the United States and moved to Chicago, where I completed my MBA at the University of Illinois in Chicago with a focus in marketing. I'm also a licensed CPA in 3 states, in Illinois, New Hampshire, and Michigan, where I now reside in Detroit. I am a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC accounting firm. I'm in their advisory consulting practice, where I work a lot with clients doing transformation of their finance organization, mergers and acquisitions, and divestitures. I won't hold it against Shanique that she works at Deloitte. I began my career there at Deloitte. I interned in the Bahamas at Deloitte, and I began as an auditor in Chicago at Deloitte. But I wised up and I joined PwC a number of years ago. But definitely it's awesome to be on the panel with Shanique and all the other panelists, and I look forward to the discussion. And thanks again for having me, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you so very much.
I won't even take those as fighting words, Mr. Ambassador. You may proceed.
It's all
very good. It's very good to have 2 accountants from different firms, Deloitte and Touche, as well as PricewaterhouseCoopers. Now we listen to perhaps the youngest person on our panel, Javon Sands, who is a proud recipient of a scholarship to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. Mr. Sands? Javon?
You're on.
I think you're muted. we're not hearing you.
Hello?
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador Jones, and thank you, fellow guests. Hello to all the viewers tuning in around the world. I'm Javon Sands. You'll have to forgive me, I'm in school.
Are you in a classroom or something? Because we're getting a feedback or something. Go ahead again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I am actually in a classroom. For right now, I'm volunteering in Puerto Rico as a part of my after graduating Benedictine Volunteer Corps. This high school actually reminds me a lot of my former high school, the great St. Augustine's College. So I'm glad to represent St. Augustine's here today. My academic history may precede me, but I'd like to introduce myself firstly as a poet, an artist, a young Bahamian, someone who is both in tune with his creative side and his Bahamian culture. And so I'm proud to be here today to speak to all of you. I am extremely grateful to represent the Bahamas on the international stage. And I'm interested in the conversation we're going to have here today. I hope to expand on that more as we get into it.
Very good. Thank you so very much. Thank you all for your introductory remarks. And I'd like to begin our conversation talking about the perception of the Bahamas. You know, in recent times, we've had some negative press concerning some social development challenges that we have going on in the Bahamas. But from where you are as professionals, students, what are people saying about the Bahamas? What is the perception of our country from where you are? Dr. Sears, let's begin with you.
The Bahamas is the best place to be. We develop some of the best and brightest scholars. Our educational program is phenomenal. So our students are prepared in the Bahamas when they come abroad. They typically are first-rate, phenomenal scholars who excel in academics, in sports, in business. It's the cultural disposition that we seek excellence in all endeavors. And so I think when persons here at the Bahamas, we have so much individuals that emulate excellence. Persons said, oh, I want to see, what do you all do there to prepare your students? And so as we celebrate, like Javon, I'm really proud of you, but we also celebrate so many students year after year who are national merit scholars, who are, you know, students who are achieving phenomenal performance on the national exam. We have students who are excelling not just in academic, but in sports, in the arts. I mean, we have well-rounded phenomenal individuals who can actually advance the Bahamas in so many elements, in so many spaces. So I do believe the Bahamas, although we're small in size, we're big in impact. So I think that is so important that when we talk about the Bahamas, we have to highlight our strengths and the wonderful leaders across the world that have been born, bred, and groomed on those various islands and keys. So I'm a proud Bahamian. I think the Bahamas has done a phenomenal job relative to education in preparing some of the best and brightest minds.
Shanique Gray?
Yeah, I'll chime in. I think your question, Ambassador, was, you know, how is the Bahamas viewed? I'll maybe give, or what have we heard? I'll maybe give anecdotally, for many of my colleagues, clients, I'm perhaps one of the first people they personally know from the Bahamas. And so I think it really does just put, not a burden, right? But it's a realization that you are, whether or not you desire it or not, once people know that you are from or connected to the Bahamas, there really is this idea that you become or form a huge part of that person's impression of what the Bahamas is, what it produces, or who it produces. I think the other part of that is there's the indirect impressions that are formed either through media, through the news or publications. I think it would be no surprise. Most people I meet, when they first hear about the Bahamas, they think about vacations and beaches and tourism. But again, my world is very different from that. And we're, you know, conversing in economics and finance and accounting every day. And so I think there is maybe somewhat of a, not a surprise, that might be a bit of a strong word, but there is an addition or an expansion of, oh, wow, the Bahamas is more than just beaches and vacations and sun, sand, and sea. I recently did a deployment to the Bahamas. I was already in the US, but then returned home to work with Deloitte in the Bahamas for about 4 years, which shout out to Deloitte Bahamas, a wonderful practice. But when I came back, people were making comments like, oh my gosh, were you working from the beach every day? And I'm like, no, there is a lot of academia, of serious business and progression that is much more than just vacations and sun, sand, and sea. So that's been my personal view. And I do take that as a responsibility, if you will, that people know you're from the Bahamas. And so the way you carry yourself, the way you perform on your job, it all is a reflection of what people's impression of the Bahamas is or will be.
Expressive.
Thank you. When I think about the perception of the Bahamas on a global spectrum, the first word that came to my mind was pride. And as Dr. Sayers and Ms. Gray both covered, pride can be in academia, but I think something more important when people first see us before we even open our mouth to know if we're intelligent or not, it's our core values, it's how we carry ourselves. And I was raised around my grandparents all of my life, and certain core values that particularly my grandparents instilled into me, I carried it in the workplace, and that got me really far. And I just wanted to give an example of an anecdotal experience. Currently, I'm working at Spoken for Communications, which is a speech therapy private practice. And usually they don't hire international students, typically because it's a lot of paperwork with the Immigration and Citizenship Office, but she said she saw my respect, she saw how committed and hardworking I was. And I think that these values probably wouldn't be as instilled in me if I was from anywhere else other than the Bahamas. I used to think that my grandparents were saying things like, don't go outside with your clothes mashed up, don't go anywhere without speaking to someone. You would be surprised how many non-Bahamian citizens will walk into a room and not speak to somebody. And it takes a lot to say good it takes nothing to say good morning, actually. So just being polite, being respectful, and just respecting your elders can get you really far. And I think that is really the cultivation of Bahamian pride.
Very interesting. I'm happy you mentioned core values, and we're going to talk about core values in a short while. But Mr. Perigord, you, I'm sure, run into a whole lot of people who are simply in awe of what you do and think very highly about the Bahamas as well.
Yes, that is correct. I think the Bahamas is definitely viewed very favorably. Obviously, people think of it as a tourist destination. They think of sun, sand, sea. They think of the Atlantis, the Bahama. They think of boating, sailing, fishing in Bimini. A lot of people I meet go to Abaco for sailing trips and whatnot. So it's definitely seen as a vacation destination, and they are always intrigued and interested when they meet someone that's from the Bahamas. Like Shanique says, sometimes I'm the first person that they've met outside the Bahamas who's from there. But I definitely think it's looked at favorably. It's also, for me, over the course of my career, been a huge differentiator and a whole huge thing that I've used to be remembered by people. So when I introduce myself as someone from the Bahamas, that's something that's memorable, and I think it's served me well over the course of my career. And also, what I've noticed, similar to Ms. Pearson, in terms of the broad-up-sea, if you will, that we have in the Bahamas, one thing I am very grateful for is the world view that I've been able to formulate, having grown up in a society where, you have strong leaders that look like you, and you have a viewpoint where you don't feel as if you are a stranger in a foreign land. So I think that is very powerful, and I think it's something that we underestimate being when we're living in the Bahamas. But when you come out of the Bahamas and you look back at it, I have been very grateful for the world view I've been able to form, having grown up in the Bahamas. So I always say I've traveled far and wide, but there's nowhere I'd rather be from than from the Bahamas. And one other thing I'll leave on this topic is that The world is watching, though. The world does see what we do, what we don't do, and what's happening within our borders. And so, like you have alluded to, is that with the recent notice that the State Department has issued around the recent crime wave in the Bahamas, I think people do hear that and they pay attention to that. So I have, over the past, week or two, been fielding questions around, well, what's happening in the Bahamas? Is it still safe to go there? And why is things so bad in the Bahamas? I think sometimes it's a distraction. And I think it gets more airplay than probably what it deserves when you think about other jurisdictions, especially even within the United States. But I do want to let my citizenry know that the world is watching and what we do matters. And I think if we want to maintain the standing and the view that people have of the Bahamas, we need to be mindful of how we conduct ourselves when we're within the borders.
Mr. Kemp, do we have much to worry about in terms of advancing the Bahamas and indeed protecting our image?
I don't think it's something to worry about per se, but one thing that's been a common theme is the broadopsy. We have to get back to our broadopsy. When I moved to America, I happened to move here for high school. And I could remember my first day in class, I was raising my hand to speak to the teacher, and she was looking at me funny. What do you raise? Where are you from? And I had to explain to her I'm from the Bahamas, where we grew up saying yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and we ask for permission before we speak. So we have to get back to our broadopsy, but also share the stories. There's so many successful people on here. We have to make sure that our youth has hope, right? When I was growing up, I had the privilege and honor to grow up in a family where I had lawyers, doctors, successful businessmen. So I was surrounded and I had no option. I couldn't just be good in life. I had to be great. So I feel as though even myself, I could do a better job at giving back to the Bahamas and also letting our youth know that, hey, it's another way that you can go about being a productive and successful Bahamian. But we have to get back to our broadopsy. And I think that is something that can be done.
Javon Sands, many people are watching you, looking at you. They are proud that you have been awarded this scholarship, this Rhodes Scholarship. Mr. Kemp just talked about young people and their hopes. Tell us how you feel about what you have accomplished, and give us some inspirational thoughts for young men like yourself who might be at risk in the Bahamas.
Thank you, Ambassador Jones. I think when it comes to hope particularly, we definitely need more examples. As Attorney Kemp was just saying, he grew up around these examples that provided sort of a goalpost to reach and then surpass. And I think that through my own lived experience, I'm doing my best to serve as an example, but also to interact with other young people and directly create these relationships, network with them, and show them that I am not necessarily beyond you. I am walking this path with you, and we're going to get to this place of hope together. And so I think my experience, especially in my undergraduate experience at St. John's University in Minnesota, the Bahamian perception there is unbelievably high because there's a legacy of Bahamian students. And beyond that, there's a mentorship program that's embedded into this through our clubs, through our social experience, where the upperclassmen teach and nourish the younger students coming in and develop them so that when it's time for them to take over, they have all the tools necessary to be prepared and to make their mark. And having that experience, something that I've taken into myself to continue in every area that I enter, in every space that I am representing the Bahamas, I am doing so with that in mind.
Thank you. Javon, I'm very happy that you mentioned what you just did. And I'd like to throw out this question to everybody on the panel and give you an opportunity to speak to it. We are proud Bahamians, and I am indeed proud to see so many young people in the United States doing a whole lot of wonderful things who are Bahamian. And I go back home and I see thousands of young people who are upwardly mobile. My question to you is, are we too hard on our young people today? Because I've listened to negative comments about young Bahamians, where they are now and perhaps where they seem to be going. Are we too hard on ourselves, young Bahamians? Dr. Sayers, we begin with you, and you all have an opportunity to express your views on that.
As an educator, and I'm using my positionality to answer this question, because it's so critical that curriculum helps to create the foundational knowledge that as a community that we value. And so, as simple as we think about having a math course or an English course, there is that experience called, your morning devotions as to where we build culture and character. There's also training initiatives that goes beyond the classroom setting, such as the PACE Foundation, for which I'm a part. We host the Character Day across the Bahamas, in which we seek to advocate good practices and policies. And then there is also the churches that provide, religious underpinnings. But going back to the fundamental educational environment, is called the family. It's in that home where we kind of learn basic respect. We learn what cultural elements we should value and appreciate, because culture is fluid and it can change from era to era, from the way we dress to the way we speak to how we interact with humanity. And so, as a collective, I think recent incidents provide an opportunity as the Bahamas as a whole, but within our individual sectors, to say, what could I do to be a part of this? And then subsequently, what's resources and curriculum training that can be implemented on small scale as well as large scale, like I said, the Character Day initiative, that is a large scale where we highlight good character. We honor individuals, hidden heroes for their contributions. But even without an award, that does not restrict your commitment to being a good human being. And so I think by thinking about, as our young men, explore the sense of belonging, because when you think about gang violence, many times persons affiliate from a sense of belonging, a desire for protection. But at the same time, we can actually develop a sense of belonging by creating entities, be it from a young man's club or initiative or a business empowerment movement. So I think rather than, I always tell persons, be careful of amplifying fear, but rather amplify purpose and possibilities and opportunities. And so the narrative in which we frame our conversation should always think about being solution driven, because too often a lot of persons highlight what is wrong. And, as an educator, like I said, we have 100 students and one student fail, and, we make a big issue out of it. But I said, let's first start celebrating the 99 and then create an intervention for the struggling. So that way we're meeting the needs of the community, and also acknowledging the strengths while also addressing the concerns. And so as we seek to acknowledge, there has been concerns relative to recent development as to what could be done for the safety. We can work with the police department. What are your current interventions? Partner with the schools. What are your plans? And then think about how could we leverage these networks? Because one thing I've learned as someone who studies systemic change is many people are doing great things, but the networks are just not talking to each other to have maximum capacity of impact. So perhaps we can even think about joint initiative, joint efforts where we support each other in building these spaces. But I do believe the Bahamas have the capacity and the ability to address it. But I just do believe by having a systemic approach to addressing it, we can definitely move forward to make a
Yeah,
better.
but are we too hard on the youth of our country? And do we recognize that there are thousands of very successful young people?
Yeah, I think sometimes we can get caught up in emotions. So depending who is the person, some persons may be too hard, while others may be too soft. So I do believe being cognizant of the positionality of the person making the claim has to be carefully considered. But I do believe youth are our future, so we have to hold them accountable. They are the Bahamas, and so we
Okay,
have to say, do something.
okay. That's great.
I guess to answer your question, are we too hard? I guess what I hear there is the caution not to paint everyone with the same brush. Because I think to your point, there are many young people that are doing wonderful things, a lot of them represented on this panel, but there are also young people that maybe have lost their way and aren't necessarily being productive and successful. I do think when I think about what the alternative to perhaps being hard or only being critical in our comments or viewpoint of our young people is to think about our personal responsibility. When I think about hearing my father, Alfred Gray, talk about what it meant to grow up in Acklands, just like you, and what it meant that the person next door was also personally vested in all of the children in the neighborhood, not just the ones in their own homes. I think it really does, we've talked about it going back to our core values. It really does beg the question, how far have we come and what might benefit us in returning to that core value, which is it's not just me and my own, but when I think about what is my responsibility, my personal responsibility, to feel a personal responsibility for the community and not just my home. We talked about the family. I think we'll all agree there's been an erosion in the base of the family, not in all circumstances, but in many circumstances. Some people just aren't born into a supportive and healthy family environment. And so that would beg the question or beg me to then think, hey, who are the people that are in my sphere of influence? And am I doing my part, not just to be critical about what they're not doing, but also to take it upon myself to say, am I being kind? Am I affording them opportunities to do something different, notwithstanding their current behavior, because their current behavior may actually be quite counterproductive, but perhaps an intervention, some care, a listening ear from somebody that cares will go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Diamond Person?
Not to run the risk of sounding corny, but I'm a true believer that pressure does make diamonds. But I do believe that too much pressure can turn diamonds into dust as well. So we have to find that sweet spot of what is enough pressure on somebody and what's, because like Miss Gray said, not everyone is the same. Somebody may be able to take more pressure. Someone may need a more gentle approach. And from a personal experience, I am my mother's only daughter. I have two other brothers. And when I was growing up, I used to be jealous of how my brothers were kind of treated differently from me. And there was more pressure on me. If I came fifth out of 80 something kids in my class, it was still, why didn't you come fourth? Why didn't you come third? Why didn't you come second? And at that time, when I was younger, I did not understand why I got so much pushback when my brother probably would get a B and he would probably get a party thrown for a B. So, but I think that pressure kind of cultivated me and grew me into who I am as an adult. I love competition. I love just exceeding. I just love doing anything that is, I feel like if it's impossible for someone, I'm going to make it my mission to get it done. So I think pressure is a good thing, but parents should also know when to use their discretion and pull back a little bit as well.
Okay, let's hear from the young man here. We begin with this time is with Mr. Sands.
Yes, I believe that the short answer is yes. We do put a lot of pressure on the youth. And I think maybe a question that takes us beyond is to ask, are we putting enough pressure on the systems, the governing bodies, the leaders, the teachers who are responsible or should be responsible for guiding the youth? We use the analogy of pressure creating diamonds, but that assumes that we're not already diamonds and we don't just need someone to pick out those diamond-like qualities. And so I believe that we are putting a lot of pressure on the youth, and I think that we should be putting more pressure on the systems and leaders and such that are responsible for guiding the youth to where we're expected to be.
Mm-hmm. Sparagon?
Actually, Mr. Sands, you took the word right out of my mouth. I fully agree with everything that's been said, and I think when we think about how hard we're being on our youth, I think we should also, amongst ourselves, and to your point, other leaders, is what are we doing to reach back and support others coming behind us? I firmly believe that one youth lost is one too many, and I really think there is no excuse for it because of We have a strong Christian population in the Bahamas. We have a strong family fabric. And we have, to your point, Mr. Ambassador, lots of successful Bahamians across the length and breadth of the Bahamas and outside, across the world. And so I feel like if each one reaches back and supports another one, I think the narrative will be very different. So I don't think it's wrong to have high standards and expect a lot from our young people, but I think we should do our part as well and help those coming behind us.
Attorney Kim?
Wow, I could hear my mind switching back and forth, just the litigator aspect of my brain analyzing both, and to hear Mr. Sands and everybody else speak. To answer your question, I would now say, yeah, no, we're not being hard enough, but not only for our youth, but also for the systems, right? And I think the only way we can get to where it can seem as though we are moving forward is if we move forward, upward and onward together, listening not only to the youth, but also to the system, to create a system that actually works. And to not only have a mindset of, hey, yeah, well, no, I ain't being too hard on that boy. You gotta come first. Which you don't know you is it. But also, Mr. Sands is saying, yeah, I know who I am. I'm a diamond. I'm me, right? But finding a marriage of both the old and the new to create something that we can all be proud of is what I would conclude. Are we being hard enough? I would say no, but we need to figure out why the youth might be saying yes.
Is inspirational leadership in our country, the Bahamas, in short supply? Do we need, you think, more inspirational leaders? And if we had more, that we would have a better society?
Sure, I'd say yes. I think we need more leadership. I would say we have the leaders. We have to just get the message out to the community and figure out a way to get the message out. Because I'm pretty sure each one of us have had somebody to give us inspiration. And if that inspiration that was given to us could be passed on to somebody else, it would definitely change their direction in life.
This is something that I put normally to a number of young people who participate in these webinars who are professional people in the United States. And I talk about cultural imperialism, the extent to which young people in the Bahamas are mimicking the negative influences coming in from other countries. We have a whole lot of good coming out of North America, but there we have negative influences coming out of North America as well, as we have from other places in the world, whether it's Europe or even in the Caribbean. The question is, have we suffered from mimicry, the extent to which we have mimicked bad, negative influences and habits coming from other countries of the world, and that this mimicry has negatively affected the core values that you all spoke about. Cultural imperialism, let's talk about that. The extent to which we are importing negative influences.
I want to speak to this and also just touch briefly on the previous question about inspirational leaders. I think Dr. Sayers mentioned earlier that essentially we have a communication problem. And so it's not necessarily that we're lacking in the area of inspirational leaders or youth willing to be inspired. It's just that those two sides aren't connecting. And so this also ties into this idea of cultural imperialism, because why is that mimicry happening? It's because there's stronger communication from outside with our youth than there is from inside with our youth. And so it's a term that I've been cultivating myself is actually called cultural maintenance. And it's something that we are seriously lacking now in the Bahamas as we're having this influence of cultural imperialism. And to me, cultural maintenance is keeping up on those core values. So we talk about things like nation building and we end there. And I think cultural maintenance has to be the next step because like once you've built up something, you have to maintain it for it to continue into the future. And we've made an error in not building up cultural maintenance and allowing cultural imperialism to take over in our country.
Interesting point.
May I
Yes? Yes?
Javon, I think you captured a lot of good points together, and I want to extend what you said because you're right. I think culture is fluid and it's constantly evolving. And as I recall, growing up in the Bahamas, ZNES was the TV station for the whole country. So the programming was not just for my home, but it was for the whole Commonwealth of the Bahamas. As we evolved, for instance, went from satellite dishes to cable, we began to have options. So this notion of programming became more diverse. And then we went further with social media. We have our Instagram, our TikTok, our Facebook, our LinkedIn. So we start broadening even additional information for what information is accessible and disseminated in real time. The challenge, however, is what is being marketed. What, the song, oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little ears, what you hear. But the reality is, what are we seeing? Unlike before, like when you had one programming station, you could have restricted the educational components. So like listening on television, you would have ensured that you had, correct grammar being communicated, polished individuals in the delivery of not just the language, but also the presentation. But now when you have different options, this notion of programming has shifted to seeing a diverse perspective and diverse representation of information in different spaces. And so as we seek to acknowledge that we are now broaden in our perspective, broaden our opportunity gain and interact with various forms of information, we as a culture have to figure out, despite this opportunity, how do we ensure what we value as a culture is still preserved? And this goes back to, we have to be intentional about our marketing, our media, our programming, that as individuals interact with other things, and we can respect other things and, acknowledge our differences and embrace differences, we can still leverage the values that we feel should be amplified for that of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
And those values being what? Give us some examples.
Well, I always I have acknowledged my positionality. I was raised in the church, okay? You go Bible study, choir practice, prayer meeting, you name it, I was in it. Singing in the choir. And then, of course, on Sunday, you go to Sunday worship. But so I acknowledge my religion underpinning. But values are not just restricted to one's religious belief, but to one's holistic interactions. Like, for example, one value is being literate. One thing I've learned growing up was, the old community, they wanted you to know how to read, to interpret, to comprehend. Appreciation for numeracy. They believe that you should be able to crunch numbers. And so like this competency of literacy and numeracy, that was a very big thing in my house. In fact, if I wanted my mother to purchase something, I had to tie it to a school initiative. That became a priority. If it was not tied, it became now an option. And that got bumped to the bottom of the barrel. So one thing is value in education. The next thing is, are you being an asset to this community? Because there are builders and there are reckless. And we have to be honest, some behaviors are just toxic, it's disruptive, it's destructive, and it's actually counterproductive to anyone wanting to be a part of that space. And so when we talk about these characteristics, creating a safe space, for example, if it wasn't yours, don't bring it in our house. And she was very candid about it. So a simple little pencil, if it ain't yours, don't bring it. But it may seem simple, but it was teaching you, do not steal. When we talk about acts of violence, like she'd say, you have to learn to communicate. Because, why is it that your hand have to go up to communicate? Why can't you talk? Why can't you address this in a better format? And so even in that thing, how do you address anger and conflict? How do you navigate conflict resolution? And so even those things were things we valued. So rather than, act with aggression, we'd always think about, she'd always say, stop, reflect, then respond. And respond, listen purposefully, not just to answer, but to really solve the problem. So that was
let me put this to you all. Isn't it difficult to preserve the values that you're talking about and to maintain your culture Ms. Gray and others, gentlemen, you can speak to this, and Diamond. Isn't it very difficult to do that when you are living in a different kind of a world that we had, say, 30 years ago, before the internet, before social media? You people are globalists. Here you are, Shanique, you are a partner in Deloitte and Touche in Washington. Mr. Paragod, you are a partner in Price Waterhouse in Michigan. Attorney Kemp, you are a lawyer in Michigan. Diamond Pearson, you are a speech pathologist in Carolina. Come on, isn't it very difficult for you to maintain in this global village that you are working in those old values, old Bahamian values, Shanique?
Yeah, so much to respond to in the last 2 minutes, but maybe to respond to your direct question, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. I think values are internal, they are perceived, and the convictions are internal and they are expressed externally. And the reason I say that is because if your values are being held to, your environment should not influence your values. Your values should really influence the way you demonstrate externally. But if your convictions are only loosely held, if your values are not your own, but perhaps have been pushed on you by other people and have not become your own, it will be very difficult for you to hold on to them when your environment changes. And the truth is, we become what we behold. I think Dr. Sayers says this. It's, and it's not only what we're seeing on TV or listening to, but I do believe that what we spend our time looking at, what we spend our time listening to, those are the things that are framing our mindsets, our perspectives. And yes, you might think listening to a particular song with particular lyrics or watching a particular show with, particular images aren't affecting who you are. But the truth is, it is forming the way you see the world, the way you operate when you walk out the doors. And so in terms of maintaining it, for me, one of the ways that I do that, irrespective of my environment, is taking a really good stock of what I'm taking in, because that allows me to maintain my perspective, my beliefs, my values, regardless of what country I'm in, who I'm surrounded with, which company I'm working for. Those things I'm really guarding what's on the inside of me, so to speak, so that what comes out remains true to who I am.
Something within so strong, eh? Something
Yeah.
within that sometimes you cannot even explain, but it's
Yeah.
all within you.
And then
Okay.
I think choosing the people you surround yourself with also helps with that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gentlemen?
Yeah, one thing I'll add to that, I think I fully agree with what Ms. Gray just said. I couldn't agree more. And I think one thing we should also just think about, being amongst people or environments that are different than what you're used to isn't always a bad thing. I don't think we should advocate for a situation where we would want to, isolate ourselves to be only amongst the people that think and act and behave the way that we do or have the same beliefs that we do. I think it's healthy as a human populace, as healthy as to be a well-rounded individual, to be aware of what's out there. But I think what it comes down to, like what Ms. Gray said, is you have to be grounded and secure and firm in what you believe, what your values are, what your convictions are. But as you learn when you travel, across the world, is that we are all more alike than we are different. And I think also you are the company you keep, and what you give out is what you attract. So if you're in a situation where you're attracting a lot of negativity, a lot of like bad influences, you got to think about, well, what are you putting out there? So I don't want us to think that in order for us to maintain our culture or to maintain our beliefs, we have to be isolated. I think we need to be able to be open to what's out there. And I'll tell you one thing that what I've found when I left the Bahamas and like with living abroad, I became more interested and more appreciative and more understanding of my own culture as a Bahamian when I see myself living amongst others that were different than I was when I was living amongst other Bahamians. So I think it's important for us to see what's out there, broaden our horizons, but to Ms. Gray's point, stay firm to who you are and not allow external forces to change what you truly believe as a Bahamian, as an individual.
It's again, there is a view that a whole lot of the problems that we have within the Bahamas is due to a lack of discipline. That even professional people are ill-disciplined, and that we are in an ill-disciplined society, and that we as much progress that we have made over the last 50 years of independence, that perhaps we can be better than we are if we had a higher level of discipline. Let's talk about that, Mr. Kemp and others.
Well, I feel as though growing up in the Bahamas, boy, discipline was at the top of the charts. When it came down to ZNS being the only channel you could watch, then you go to school. If you misbehaved, the teacher would beat you in front of the class. Then you have to go home and get a whooping, and ain't no telling what was else. And I'm not saying discipline is only beatings, right? But that established the mentality, boy, I need to do the right thing. And that created core values that is consequences to every action, right? And so once you realize that, hey, 1 + 1 is 2, you don't want that 2 to be something that that might give you the blues. So to answer your question, yes, I believe discipline is needed, but discipline is something that I don't, in comparison to where I've been at, discipline is not something I would say is really lacking in the Bahamas.
Okay, interesting, a very interesting perspective. Diamond Bessa?
Yes, thank you. I found it so interesting that Mr. Kemp said that discipline is no longer a problem in the Bahamas, because I noticed that I don't know when it started, but I noticed that there was a shift from it takes a village to raise a child to no one can hit my kids but me. Because I remember when I was younger, if you got into problems, your grandparents didn't have to get on the phone to call your mother first before she reprimanded you. She would deal with that right there. You're in her house. You did something that was wrong. She's going to reprimand you right then and there. But somewhere along the line, newer parents are now saying that they're not going to allow any other family member to discipline their child other than them. If there's a problem, call them. So I think that transition has become an issue for a lot of the issues that we experience in the Bahamas. And I think sparing the rod does kind of spoil the child. But I also, like Mr. Kemp, don't agree that, physical beating has to be instrumented in order for a child to understand where you're coming from. Sometimes, especially in my professional line of work, communication does go a long way. Explaining something to a child to let them know where they are wrong, that goes a long way as well. But I just think having a routine as young Bahamians is what also gave us discipline as adults. We knew Sunday was church. After church, it's the Sabbath. You can't go outside. You can't play. Saturdays, you have band practice. Tuesdays, you have dance practice. So when you become an adult, multitasking shouldn't be a problem for you because you are already disciplined as a child to have a certain routine from Monday to Sunday.
Jawan Sands, speak to the issue of discipline. You are becoming a Rhodes Scholar because you are a disciplined individual. If you weren't, you could not be where you are. And all of you have succeeded in one way, shape, or form. We have many young men, Javon Sands, who are living a life of crime, and we have our social development challenges. We talked earlier on about inspirational leadership and how important it is. Inspire them in these moments, Mr. Sands, to become more disciplined so that we can have less social problems that we have than we have now?
Well, I believe that I want to talk about contaminated diversity, which is a term that I recently became familiar with. And I think it kind of speaks to the issue of discipline in some ways. And it basically talks about how the world that we're in today didn't just pop up overnight. And so we've had some examples of how, things have changed in the Bahamas, in the world at large. And I think that contaminated diversity plays a big role in that. And it's diversity born of global issues. So wars and social injustices, those sorts of movements over the years and embedded in our personal history in the Bahamas and also in the global scene. And I think that this issue of contaminated diversity is directly linked to our problem of discipline. And while I agree that the discipline that we need is not at all physical, I think that there is a challenge with creating discipline otherwise in a nation that has those strong roots in physical discipline or guiding on the principles of spare the rod, spoil the child. Now, in my opinion, one way that we can inspire our youth, inspire our young men to be more disciplined towards their goals is to actually find out what those goals are. What is drawing them away from our perceived ideas of where they should be going? And the only way to do that is through education, through a community surrounded and or embedded in education, where we have education as a principle that is founded in community, and there's a relationship between the youth and the education system that brings out these ideas of, I have these goals that I'm going to be disciplined towards. And so to encourage the youth, I would say, learn, do your best to engage with the education system. And if you find yourself unable to engage with the education system, create your own education system among yourselves, with your peers. Find a way to educate yourselves if you're not finding that from the current education system, because we all, I think, can agree that knowledge is power. But if we don't have access to that knowledge, if we don't relate to that knowledge, we won't be able to be disciplined towards our goals. We won't even be able to understand what our own goals are. And I think that the lack of discipline that we're seeing is due to people being lost and not having any goals, not being able to figure out what their goals are because they don't have the representation, the guidance, the discipline, or the education to understand what those goals are and how to achieve them.
Yeah.
Interesting point and interesting concept about the diversity that you're talking about, Mr. Sands. There are, Sinead Gray, many young people in our country who are education averse. And while we ought to be pushing education, and it is difficult, let me use a very plain and easy word for people to understand. It is very difficult to be dumb when you have social media, when you have access to the internet and to what is happening in the world. You have to really push hard to be dumb in any country that you're operating in because of the opportunities for educational development around you. But yet you have so many young people who are averse to good education. How do we inspire them to become better educated so that they are able to make better contributions to the social development of the Bahamas?
Yeah, great question. And I think it actually is a continuation of the conversation we were just having. Javon mentioned how important it is to have goals. The word I was thinking is purpose. So you guys have probably all heard somebody say, I don't need to pay attention in math. I won't use that when I'm an adult. Like, I don't need that. What that says to me is, I don't think this class has a purpose, so I'm not going to pay attention. But if we flip that on its head and there is a purpose that's identified, then the information becomes more relevant, more accretive, more valuable. And so I do think it does go back to purpose. Many young people, I think, are still trying to figure out, what is my purpose? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And in the absence of purpose, I do think there is this idleness, this consuming of information. But to your point, the consuming of information, being on TikTok all day, reading Instagram, or watching Instagram memes, there's a lot of information being consumed, but it's not A, purposeful, or B, if it is purposeful information, it's not being put toward any particular purpose. And so it really just becomes useless information at best, many times. And so I do think it really does go back to, in my own life, if I think about it, if I'm having an idle day, I didn't really have anything planned, there were no goals, 8 hours could fly by really quickly. But if I have a set list of tasks, a purpose that I'm working toward, that 8 hours becomes more of a tool, whereas my time is being used to advance my purpose as opposed to being squandered. And so, I don't know, I guess that's what comes to mind, really helping people figure out, what's my purpose. One question I love to ask people is, what did you want to be when you were growing up? I find that there is an innate sense of drawing and calling that we almost sense as young children, and we get distracted or pulled in a different direction along the way. So I do think it really does go back to, what am I doing? What's my purpose? What am I working toward?
As ambassador to the United States, I speak with fellow ambassadors here, and they have a very high perception of the Bahamas. They believe that the Bahamas is one of the leaders in the Americas. We know that we are doing extremely well in tourism and in sports and other things. Let me ask you, in terms of the overall governance of our country, as professional people and people who are well educated, what do you think about the quality of governance in the Bahamas? We start with the fellas. Mr. Perigord.
It's a very, very good question, and I struggle with where to start because it can be a very controversial one as well. But one thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is, I want us to challenge ourselves of what are we doing differently? Because they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, trying to get a different result. And I feel like the way we govern our country and the way that we run our politics and the way that we look to make change in our country, I feel like we're still doing things the way we did it back when we first became independent. That was probably the way it needed to be back then. But I think, what are we doing differently now, and how are we changing the game, and how are we doing things in a thought-provoking and more strategic way? And are we thinking about governance in the span of 5 years, or are we thinking about it in the span of a longer term than that? I sometimes struggle that we and our leaders make decisions for the short term, and there's no long-term strategic planning. I also sometimes get concerned that we, as leaders of the government, doesn't always do the things that are empowering to the community. I feel like we have a system where we, as Bahamians, sometimes are dependent upon our leaders, as opposed to our leaders putting in place guardrails and support systems that inspire and encourage and empower us, so that we as Bahamians can rise above the higher and higher heights. So I think that although we've done a good job of getting ourselves to where we are, definitely very proud of the 50 years, and we have a generally peaceful society, no wars and things like that. But I feel like we need to now think about, okay, what are we going to do for the next 50 years? How are we going to govern ourselves differently? And how are we going to challenge ourselves to really take the Bahamas to another level? Because I feel like I don't want us to be living on past glory and have things sort of like fizzle out, as we go. So I want us to really challenge the status quo and really, think about things in a different way. I'll pause there.
Yeah, Mr. Kemp, let's hear you on the quality of governance in the Bahamas.
I believe the quality is good. We're a baby country if you look at it, right? 50 years is not that long of a time. A lot of the people who are in the leadership aren't even 50 years of age. I believe that I love how involved some of the youth are getting with the governance. So a lot of the ideas to help us to grow, uh, it's an opportunity there that I believe that we can take advantage of to help us get to the next level. Because as Bahamians, we all want that. We all, man, you're proud to be a Bahamian and you want to be the best. So I believe that with the old leadership and some of the new leadership coming forward, we have a great opportunity to continue to build on what we have now.
Okay. Sayers, Dr. Sayers.
I must admit that was a loaded question, but I'm going to answer from this notion as to I like what Paragot said. He said it very well. We've done a lot, but we have a lot of work to go as we move forward. I think as we acknowledge not just being an infant country, but we're a striving country. And so I think this is a challenge as to our structure that was established during the 1973 and evolved, but really think about to what extent can we actually advance innovation in a timely fashion. So we seek to reflect on ways to improve the infrastructure, really think about the timeliness of the innovation, because there is a process, and with governance, time is a variable. But as we seek to be competitive in a global market, the time constraint has to be adapted in how we design future initiatives for governance. So I acknowledge, particularly for education, I must give honor to the current Minister of Education, Gladys Martin. I was impressed. I mean, normally I'm very politically neutral because as an educator who evaluates education, I have to maintain some level of neutrality. What I saw during COVID-19 got my attention because at that point, her commitment was really, how could we address this issue? Do we have to go door to door? Do we have to create, innovations and testing? Do we have to create new structures? So she was willing to push the advancement of education. Now, clearly, that was not the normalcy as to say, okay, this is what we do. But she was thinking, what could we do? And I think that in itself, to me, was innovative. But now really think about how do we adapt those policies into the current structure? So that was the idea. But then there's this process called time. And so I think that is where we have to really figure out how could we ensure there is not a jet lag in implementing the needs to advance the country. And so as we move forward, I think governance is promising, but I do believe we need to expedite some, even like, for example, with the legal system, like expedite the processing of cases. So that's an opportunity for us to grow. So once again, these are opportunities for us to reflect upon. How could we reflect on time itself in our practices?
Ms. Gray?
I wasn't sure you were going to call on me, but okay, I'll take it.
But since she mentioned education as an educator, she's a professor.
No, I'll take it. I'm only smiling because some of you might know, I'm sure Vern knows this because we go back. My father was a politician. He is now on a government assignment, but so that's really why this could be controversial.
Okay.
But honestly, I think.
So let me then tease you then on financial services. Since she spoke a little bit about education, we've lost a little bit of ground, I think, in financial services. And you being in the position where you are as a partner in Deloitte in Washington, so speak for a minute on financial services and where we are and how we can, as a government, improve in that respect.
Yeah, I think one of the things that first comes to mind is when I think about global standards, regulation is what comes to mind first. I think anyone in financial services globally, but including in the Bahamas, would say a lot of their time, resources, people resources, money resources is now being spent on regulation, complying with regulation, keeping up with the changing regulation throughout the world, really. It has become a huge burden, for lack of a better word, on businesses. I don't think any businesses in the Bahamas are exempt. I do think what it really is intended to do is allow and bring the Bahamas and all countries to a similar starting line, such that whether you're, doing banking in the Bahamas or Australia or the UK, the intention really is that what is at priority first is not profit, but it is your customer base, your clients, integrity of the capital markets to ensure that fair practices are being adhered to ensure things like tax evasion or tax avoidance. Many of the things that I think the Bahamas was traditionally known for, potentially known for, previous blacklists, et cetera. I think the regulation really is intended such that the Bahamas would be seen as a formidable, if you will, contender in terms of where businesses, banks, financial institutions choose to hang their shingle, so to speak. And so when I think about the financial markets, there's a lot, but regulation probably is one of the key drivers, if you will, to where people are choosing to do business, the counterparties they're choosing to do business with, and the cost and investment that's putting on financial institutions throughout the world.
In one of the previous webinars that we've done here in the embassy, we asked young people like yourselves about whether or not there is a brain drain going on in our country, the Bahamas. And we see throughout the United States a whole lot of Bahamians holding down some very important positions and doing extremely well. Do you believe, Diamond Pearson, that there is a brain drain, or are we simply just developing global citizens?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Do we have a brain drain going on in the Bahamas, where young people are leaving and going looking for opportunities outside the Bahamas, or are we simply developing global citizens who are holding their own around the world? Let's go quickly on it.
I think we're representing global citizens that are holding their own across the world, because if you look at outside of the United States, if you look at other places like Europe, we have Bahamians almost everywhere. I actually saw something on Facebook where a Bahamian went to Antarctica recently, and I thought that was really interesting. But I think the retention problem of Bahamians going off to school and not coming back home, it kind of goes back to the quality of governance question that I wanted to touch on. But I just think that a lot of Bahamians, they go off to school abroad and they don't come back home because either they're not getting what they know that they would get in another country from a financial standpoint, from an experimental standpoint, or they just realize that there are better opportunities in another country.
Mr. Kemp, same question.
Well, that's a tough one there. But I would have to somewhat agree, just the opportunity, right? We want the best lifestyle, especially if you have family, you want to be able to provide them with the best lifestyle and opportunity. But I do believe, now that I'm older and privy to more opportunities, that the Bahamas does have a opportunity to take advantage of a lot of the brain power and compensate those individuals accordingly.
Okay. Mr. Sands, as we talk about climate change and our Prime Minister and the government, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we've been focusing on climate change and making the voice of the Bahamas heard around the world with respect to climate change. I noticed with great interest that you are going to focus on the environment and climate as well. Tell us why.
Well, first, I do want to say that in recent years, as I've been gaining more ground in my pursuit of climate studies and environmental studies, I am extremely proud of what the Bahamian government has been doing on the global stage with representing our country. I think the reason that I am pursuing these areas of study is because I want to preserve the Bahamas, our culture, our people. And I think I want us to have the ability to, yes, go out and be able to explore the world, and that there's much of the world left for us to explore. but also I want us to have a home to come back to. And so that really drives my passion for these areas of studies, because the Bahamas is at high risk in terms of facing the climate crisis. And I also think that addressing this problem, addressing the climate crisis, can allow us to find those areas in the Bahamas where there are other issues that are tied to this climate crisis or are being tied to this climate crisis that we can also improve on and address if we approach the climate crisis with a solutions mindset. For me, I am a problem solver. My undergraduate degree was in applied physics, and I was attracted to it because I am a problem solver. And so it's kind of hard for me to turn a blind eye to what is being considered the greatest problem of the century, and of human existence, really. And so I think that those are sort of the drivers for me, but it's really grounded in my love for my country, for my people, and wanting to preserve the culture that we've developed.
Where are you on this question of a brain drain? You don't agree with that, do you?
I don't think that there is necessarily a brain drain, because then that assumes that our country isn't our people. And I think that it is. And I think that we expand our country, we grow our country even when we're not residing inside of it. And so my brain it has a stamp of approval from the Bahamas. You know, it's a Bahamian brain. So no matter where I take it, I'm representing my country, and our country is benefiting from that.
Well said. Shanique Gray?
Yeah, I would just interject that, I was thinking about the brain drain question specifically. I've challenged myself, notwithstanding my zip code, my residence is not currently in the Bahamas. Am I personally doing anything, regardless of the address, that is accretive to the Bahamas? And so I look for opportunities. I mentioned I was with Deloitte Bahamas for 4 years, 2 years ago. I just did a session with them 3 weeks ago. So like there's this idea of, your physical location may not be in the Bahamas, but is your commitment to invest, to pour back, is it there irrespective or regardless of your physical address? And I just think that's an important question for those of us that maybe don't have a physical address currently in the Bahamas. Am I at least still contributing to the advancement of an individual, a group, an industry? And it's really a personal question that I think each of us has to hold ourselves accountable to.
Dr. Sayers? Yes?
Shanique, you said it well, because I've always said it's not where you're located, it's what you do. And I think with the advancement of technology, we can all contribute to different spaces. And I think this is why it's so critical to leverage networks, leverage the skill set of the community. And so as simple as like last year, I did a professional development training for teachers in San Salvador. But, they set up the Zoom and we did it. So we reimagine how could we deliver the training to support the teachers' need, but also draw on the strengths of the individuals to address the concern that they wanted to be addressed. As it relates, like, for example, the PACE Foundation. I've been out of the Bahamas since 2008, but I'm an active board member, relative to building a school for teen mothers and thinking about what could we do to even advance the Character Day or even consider further ways to address social issues in the Bahamas and the larger community. But once again, this goes back to being visionary, being willing to take risk, being willing to invest in the platforms to allow persons to participate in these conversations. Because if the meeting was face-to-face, clearly I would not be able to be there. But as simple as sending a Zoom link, you're getting in the voices. So this notion of brain drain, I think it just allows us to reflect on how do we communicate? How do we leverage technology to draw on the skill set? Because like I've learned, one thing I love working in Tampa, and I learned it as a lesson as a scholar, it's not where you're located. The question is, do you have the skill that I need? And if we have to, connect on Zoom, if your time is 12 hours from my time, if I have to get up 1 o'clock in the morning to get that paper written, we'll do it. But this goes back to being driven by a vision, having a clear purpose and an outcome, and then thinking who has the skill set to actually answer that question. And so like right now, when we're looking at a consortium, I told my colleagues, we need to find the persons who can address these goals. So we're not seeing where you're located, we're seeing, can you help us get this goal? So as we build this consortium, we're going to be across the United States. but we're drawing each other's strengths. And I think this is the same construct as to how do you address a perspective of a brain drain, but acknowledging we do have the skill sets that are tied to the Bahamas, and how could we connect to those spaces?
Through the wonders of technology, we have been able to have this conversation today. And I am wondering, as we engage the diaspora across the United States of America in these webinars, I'm wondering, how can you, as individuals, as professionals, assist your country from where you are? And are you being engaged? Are you being asked to participate in various initiatives and programs? Are you willing? What are you doing from where you are to advance this project called the Commonwealth of the Bahamas? We begin with Mr. Perigord. And just give me 2 minutes, each of you.
Sure, Mr. Ambassador. I think it's a great question, and one thing I'll highlight, and as I'm sure you're aware, one of the things that I've volunteered to do is most recently become a honorary consul for representing the Bahamas here in the Detroit, Michigan area. And so, as that, I see myself as a honorary ambassador myself to sound the call to let people know the Bahamas is there, what we are about, and what benefits that we offer to the world population at large. And I think when you talk about a brain drain, I think I would frame it differently, in that I think that we on this call and all those Bahamians who are across the world, who are basically resources that the Bahamas now has far and wide, I think we, to your point, can reach back and provide support to the Bahamas in various different ways. And the government can now rely on or call on these resources to help it further its mandate, for the Bahamas. So for me, to answer your question, I've volunteered to be an honorary consul, but separate from that, I'm also very still engaged with my local community in terms of the church that I went to as a young boy. I'm engaged with my family who were still there, and I do informal mentoring and support of young men who are coming up behind me as well, even though they still live in the
Very
Bahamas.
good. Very good. Now I'm going to ask you for a minute now, so let's make it brief. We're running out of time. Mr. Kemp?
Well, my uncle Lyndon Rose is honorary consul in Houston, and so I have the privilege and honor of mentoring a lot of the kids who attend Texas Southern University in Houston, and it's quite a few of them as well. But also being in Michigan, just using my network. Matter of fact, we're bringing in a group of potential investors to Nassau and Cat Island next week, and just to show them what my country is about and some of the opportunities that are available to my country, and just letting them know that, hey, man, it's nothing better than the Bahamas. And
very good. Ms. Gray?
Yeah, I would say in short, I'll even take 30 seconds. For me, it's getting back and giving back as often as I can, whether that's through church, through financial contributions, through spending time with people. It really is just a matter of staying close. Like if the Bahamas is in your heart, no matter where you live, you will find a way to make investments.
You get your 30 seconds, Ms. Sayers. 30?
Yes, I would always tell persons invest not just with words, but also with actions, and also hopefully with money. So like Woodcock Primary, CL Walk, I sponsored the math award. I made a commitment to those students, and I would never break it. Also, too, like even the students who come to the University of South Florida, we're the Bahamian United. I'm the advisor for the club, but we have to go further. Like the College of the Bahamas, we explored potentially writing a grant together to advance math education. So really thinking about not just our expertise, but our humanity, because I always say it's not just what you do, but it's how you do it. And so your positive words, your opportunity to encourage. So really think about, like Shanique said, I love it, giving back, not just physically, but holistically.
Okay, thank you so very much. And we have 30 seconds each for Ms. Pearson.
In addition to my capstone project, something that I did while I was in North Carolina, I was a first-time voter in 2021. And even though I'm in a state that didn't have an embassy, I got on a flight and I went to Atlanta in the midst of exam season. So I will encourage Bahamians abroad, especially if you're a first-time voter, use your voice. Your vote counts. It's not just one vote, and you matter.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Sands.
So something I'm committed to with my experience is creating pathways for education. And so wherever I am, whether it be my undergraduate experience at CSBSJU, Yale University, where I recently worked, and now Oxford, I'm creating opportunities for Bahamian students to have a future in those institutions.
Thank you so very much, you all, for participating in the conversations on the program today. We really appreciate all of your powerful contributions, and we wish you well in all of your endeavors here in the United States. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you as well, Ambassador.
Thank you too.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great day, everyone. Be safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.